4.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Law, notice is hereby given that a final hearing before this commission is appealable to the Chancery Court of Davidson County or the Circuit Court of Davidson County by way of statutory writ of certiorari. You are advised to seek your own independent legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements are met. You should also seek independent legal advice regarding the applicability of the writ of certiorari to the specific decisions of the Historic Zoning Commission. And at that, we will now present the consent agenda.
Sure.
Sure, let's do that first. She keeps waiting. No, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 15th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now for the consent agenda. We have 5 items on the consent agenda. The first is 118 Pembroke, which is in Belmead and is an application for an addition, which is both a rear addition and a side addition, an accessory structure, and this accessory structure requires a rear setback reduction. 2701 Oakland Avenue is also an application for an addition and an accessory structure for partial demolition of non-contributing additions to the rear of the property and a setback reduction for the accessory structure. 807 Boscobel is an addition and a setback reduction in the Edgefield Historic Zoning Overlay. 1804 Boscobel is an application for an addition and partial demolition. And then finally, 1807 Ashwood is an application for an addition and partial demolition. Staff believes that all of these items meet their respective design guidelines and recommends approval of the consent agenda.
Is there anyone who would like to pull any of these items on the agenda? If not, then we will entertain a motion from the commission. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve per staff recommendation on the consent agenda.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Any comments? Otherwise, I hear a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right. Moving into the new business, 3730 Whitland Avenue.
And that item has been pulled from the agenda. We were able to approve that administratively.
Okay. Thank you. Right. 1419 Holly Street.
Thank you. I did want to point out, too, that you did receive some public comment on this that was sent to you via email yesterday. This project is for a lot at the corner of 14th and Holly Street. And it's for the most part vacant, and this has been at least since 1914 from the records we could find, with the exception of this secondary dwelling that's at the back of the unit. So part of the proposal, back of the lot, excuse me, part of the proposal is to remove this building, which does meet the guidelines for demolition. The form, the materials, the construction methods, and the age is out of the period of significance. So we recommend demolition if the rest of the project is approved. The project is for duplexes, attached duplexes, and they are 1.5 story, which matches the context of the neighborhood. And they are proposed to vary in height because the grade varies in height. But from the front, they're about 30, the proposed is about 30 to 32 feet high. And this is the context, which is about 17 to 26 feet tall. Here's a better image of it. On the north side, there is, on the 15th Avenue side, there is a wall and a wall dormer and a bay combined that we were concerned accentuated the height. It does meet all the bulk zoning requirements and covers about 36% of the lot. Let's go back to this one, which is a little bit over the average for the area, which is about 25%. And here's the front, where you can see the height on the left is about 32, and on the right, I believe, it's about 30. So staff found that in terms of the height and the bulk and the area that it covers. It doesn't quite meet the guidelines, and so we recommend, and there is a project that's under construction that's similar in development, so there's an opportunity to see how it's working there. It's a different neighborhood, but kind of get an idea of how it's working. So staff is recommending that duplexes in areas like this be dealt with in one of two ways. Either it be one big building that has 2 units side by side, like you see historically, and this is an infill as well, but most of these are historic. Or it be the type of development where you have a primary structure facing the main street and then a smaller, much more subordinate structure facing the side street. And this is an example in the very back. You can see the little White House back there, and it's hard to see under the light, but it is at the back of that lot. And of course, in this scenario, codes would require that it be attached. But it's this same type of development that we're recommending for sites like this and to deal with duplexes. It meets the bulk zoning, setbacks, rhythm of spacing, and materials, but where we had concerned about it meeting the design guidelines is in terms of the roof dormers, which are atypical for the district. They are something that we have approved in the past, and upon seeing them constructed, as you know, it's quite a bit different to look at them on paper than to see them finished. We found that they really don't meet the guidelines that well, and they do accentuate the height, which is usually we're trying to do the opposite and kind of de-accentuate the height. So staff recommends that the dormers do not meet the guidelines. The porch is a little bit shallow. The commission has always required that it be at least 6 feet. The orientation doesn't meet the guidelines. Let me go back to this one, because the entrance is actually off to the side. There's also a vehicular access on the side street leading to a 2-bay garage, and the guidelines only really allow for an attached garage when it's at a basement level or when it's in an area that is typical for the historic district, which in this case would be back towards the alley. So this wide driveway leading to a 2-car bay garage doesn't meet the guidelines. Let's see. Forgive me, I left my notes at the office, so I'm a little bit out of order. There are no known fences, walls, or lighting associated with this project. Staff recommends disapproval as it does not meet Section 2B for new construction in Laughlin Springs neighborhood. Although demolition of the existing structure does meet the guidelines, staff does not recommend permitting it until a plan for new construction has been approved. Thanks.
Come forward. This is open for public hearing. People that would like to speak, please come up with your name and address. At this time, are there any questions or clarifications that the commission would like before we go into our public hearing? If not, you'll identify yourself, please.
Good afternoon. My name is John Root. I'm the architect representing the applicant for the project located at the site here. I believe this proposal for a 2-family structure is very compatible with the neighborhood and meets the intent of the design guidelines for the Laughlin Springs Conservation District. In the handouts that I've given you, I've included a couple things. One is a letter of support from a former staff member, Mr. Schultz. I've given you 3 renderings for the project that hopefully will convey a little more of the intent. And I've given you additional site photos because I think there's some topographic information that's hard to read on a couple of the photos. And then I've given you a few examples of homes within the district that I thought would be very relevant to the conversation that we're about to have. And I guess starting, there's a lot to cover here, and bear with me. Responding to the scale, this is kind of an internal kind of debate we've all had here about the big house duplex concept. And I feel like a large home duplex that are not appropriate for corner lots. And I think this site is very unique in that it is a corner lot. And a duplex development of that size and scale would not be appropriate for Holly Street. As I have in the past, I strongly disagree with the staff's recommendation that a large home development would be more appropriate. When you design 2 independent structures that face different streets, it allows for the separation that would be more characteristic of 2 single-family homes. The proposal today is for two separate 1.5-story structures, only connected in the middle by a small 1-story appendage that essentially separates the home by 10 feet. This separation, along with the 1.5-story designs, were an intentional response to staff's earlier criticism from earlier projects regarding the scale and the desire to have more separation between the two homes. The height, the homes in the immediate context are indeed 1.5 stories that range from the 17 to 26-foot height. However, no consideration was given to the 30-foot tall home immediately across 15th, and I've given you a photo of that. Nor was the unusual topographic conditions of the Holly Street considered. I think Holly Street's kind of drops maybe 40 feet from the top of the hill down to the kind of the lower end area. But I've brought additional site photos here for you today for further consideration. The height on the front home is 28 feet from the finished floor elevation. Taking into account for the topography, we have placed the rear home slightly lower at 16 inches lower, and it only rises 24 feet from that front house finished floor elevation. Since the initial submission, I've studied the topography a great deal, and I feel comfortable that the rear home can actually sit a little lower, and I'm comfortable saying that the difference would be 6 feet, not 4 feet as submitted. I've shown this along with the corrected topography within the renderings for your consideration. The heights of these homes do in fact respond to their immediate context, and their 1.5-story designs further accentuate their conformance with design guidelines. In regards to the scale and the rear home being subordinate, I do feel that rear home is subordinate, and I've tried to show you that in the renderings that I've submitted to you. If the elevations are reviewed from the 15th Avenue elevation, the front home facing Holly is 40 feet wide. The width of the rear home, when you consider the main massing element that the porch structure is inset into, is only 31 foot 6 inches. Yes, the rear home is 42 feet, but again, it's the massing and the setbacks that indeed make that massing read differently from the rest of the house. The footprint of the project is not large. It is appropriate and meets the intent of Article B. As staff has noted, the coverage is 36%, but I would like to point out if you divide by 2, that's 18%, and 18% is well within the range of 15 to 25% of the homes nearby. I don't know if we should stop now and discuss the scale issues, or if I should just address the other staff's comments about the architectural features and design of the home. I guess.
Why don't we wait and see if their staff has any, the commission has any questions of you, and you'll address them at that time?
Sure. I can go on about the inset of the porch, and I've shown you some examples about that, and we can talk about the wall dormers and all that kind of stuff as we need to, but I feel like the scale and the massing is probably the big issue here that we need to discuss first. And
okay. Well, let's address that at the time of questions. Would you like to do that? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Root. Is there anybody else that would like to address them? We'll bring Mr. Root back up.
My name is Rebecca Rotz, and I live at 1409 Gartland Avenue in the Lachlan Springs Historic Overlay. Personally, I'm not as concerned. I don't live on the street. The height, to some extent, is a little bit hard for me to understand in the drawing without being there on the street. But I think what concerns me the most is first the garage door that faces the side street. You don't see this condition anywhere in the neighborhood except maybe one example that was built sometime in the 70s or 80s before there was an overlay. And I honestly think a covered drive under for the cars would be better, without the garage door, or maybe even that piece being removed and still having the cars be able to park there. Ideally, I'd like to see all of the access come off the alley. That's how these houses historically take their access, and to put in another drive cut on this street where there aren't sidewalks currently, I just think is not really good for the aesthetic of the street or the pedestrians' experience. In the back, and I know this happens from time to time, but with the 20-foot setback off of the alley, the garage is extremely visible walking down the street. And this is the same condition. I think in the original staff recommendation, there was the example of the house on 14th and Forest. Is a large one structure duplex, but it's a similar garage situation. And that garage is all you see when you're coming up 14th. So I think sort of the visibility of that garage, I don't know if you have any sort of leeway to say that that has to be screened in some way with a fence or shrubs or something like that. But that's certainly a condition that I'm concerned about. And then I think as far as the massing goes, there was a sort of recommendation that a lot of the existing historic duplexes are one structure. They seem more like one structure, even when they have the two little doors. And I think those work in their historic context, and the problem is today people who are building duplexes, understandably, those don't have a whole lot of square footage in the structure, and people today, when they buy houses, they want more square footage. And I'm not sure where those two things meet, because at some point you have a historic overlay and you bought a property in an area knowing that there was a historic overlay with guidelines that you were going to need to follow. And I understand the desire to have the separate structures from the builder and the homeowner's point of view, but I agree that the second needs to be a little subordinate to the primary, and that if you are going to combine it into one structure, you can't do these blown out enormous structures, because those aren't really in keeping with the duplexes, the historic duplexes in the neighborhood. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mary Vavra. I live at 110 South 16th Street. I'm here as a resident and also on behalf of the Neighborhood Association, Laughlin Springs Neighborhood Association Board. I would agree, or we would agree, with staff recommendations to disapprove this applicant. It's not that we are against townhomes, it's just this particular style, particularly with the garage facing 15th. We know the other piece of property that was mentioned further along 15th that backs. By approving this, it would further erode 15th, and we feel like garages should face the alley. There is an alley there, and staff did an excellent job showing examples that of infill that would work. So we encourage the applicant to perhaps present at the next Neighborhood Association meeting, work with the neighbors, and we ask that you disapprove this plan today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward?
Yes.
Identify yourself.
My name is Kim Hatcher. I live at 1501 Holly Street, so directly across the street from the proposed building site. I just wanted to say that I do appreciate the effort that has been made on these separate structures, but I would have to agree with the Historical Society in saying that the mass is somewhat out of context for the neighborhood. The garage is facing the street, again, is something that you really don't see. And just that appreciation for the reason that I bought my house was because I wanted to live in a neighborhood that protected the historical details of the houses nearby. And that's important to me to see continued. And so I would recommend that we follow the guidelines from the Historical Society.
I'm Julie Kalberg. This is Jack Kalberg. He has a lot to say. I'm sorry. He's usually
I don't
very quiet,
understand.
6-month-old. But all he knows to say is, and he has to say that, unfortunately, today. I live at 1503 Holly, so I'm adjacent to Kim Hatcher, directly across 15th from this site plan. And I just want to say that, when we bought our house 5 years ago, we bought it for the historic overlay, not in spite of it, because it really is a great tool for the planning committee and for developers as well to keep in guidance with the neighborhood and preserve the historic nature of our street. Holly Street is a great street, especially our block, in that we all have porches, we all talk to each other. It's very rare nowadays for you to know your neighbor, not to mention even speak with them on a regular basis. And I can honestly say that I speak with Kim all the time. I speak with all the adjacent homeowners, and we have a nice little community there. And so this week, in speaking about this meeting this week, I've gotten the consensus of all of our neighbors, which is also, recommending the disapproval because we really want something to be more consistent with the style and the scale, just as the Historic Planning Committee's report says. You know, when you look at our street and the slope of the hill, there is some topography to consider, and no house in our block, not to mention our neighborhood, has a garage attached with a great room above it. Maybe some days I wish I had a great room, but I have a small historic cottage, and I really want to preserve the look of our street with these quaint little cottages, people sitting on their porch, chatting with each other, and feeling a sense of community with young growing families, not condos with kids partying down at 5 Points. I mean, that's a different sort of nature. And I believe the architect is the same behind the 104 North Forest property that our neighbors and a lot of the community refer to as the big ugly yellow thing behind Matt Donna's. You know, it is actually important to take into that precedence. Yes, that was approved, but for our block where it is not commercial, where it is residential, and there are small quaint cottages, please keep that in consideration, that it really is important to the homeowners and our house value that it stays consistent with that. And lastly, Jack here really loves the magnolia trees that are in the front of the lot along Holly Street. There's two very old historic magnolia, and I don't know if they've been there since 1914 because since then nothing's been developed there. But if the planning could take into consideration maybe keeping one of those trees and incorporating it. I know the Historic Commission doesn't preserve trees, but they are really magnificent. And I know that our neighbors that developed on Lindsley Park in a lot behind us had to, with historic guidance, keep 2 trees remaining to sort of buffer the blank wall of the side of their house. That might be helpful here in keeping it consistent with the neighborhood that does have mature trees, mature growth, and quaint scale. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Then we will close the public hearing and open the floor to questions and clarification, and that way Mr. may be able to answer.
I was just going to say you might want to allow him an opportunity to rebut public comment before.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess the biggest thing here is I don't think it's appropriate for staff to reference a previously approved project in this context. I think the project under construction at Grantland we're very familiar with, and the one reference on North 14th Street really have no relevance to the submission. The massing, the scale, the rhythm, it's completely different, and the criticism on those 2 projects were taken into account with meeting with staff in formulating a design for this proposal. Many of the comments from earlier projects, were taken into consideration. And I guess I presented to you earlier the appropriateness of side-facing garages, and I think side-facing garages can be appropriate in historic districts. It is a factor of having limited square footage to deal with that, and being a corner lot and reduced setbacks. It was suggested by staff to run the driveway behind the rear house, but there's just not enough room to accomplish all that. And with the topography being about a 5-foot drop from the front corner to the back corner, it's hard to accomplish all that in one. So that's the only thing I would say there. And with that, I'm open to your questions and comments and concerns.
Okay. All right.
Would you consider a deferral? I mean, I just think we have to be sensitive to the neighbors and
absolutely
and the staff, and I just don't think at this
absolutely.
point
I don't.
Looks
you know,
good.
I think the renderings that were submitted weren't really, truthfully, an accurate representation of what the proposal was, and I would support a deferral to give time to some of the neighbors to study the plans a little better.
They invited you to their meeting. I think it would be very helpful. But I think you're going to have to do a little bit more than just renderings. What I'm hearing is going to be a pretty, almost a redesign. But I'm willing to give you that opportunity if I don't know what the other commissioner, instead of just disapproving this.
Sure. I mean, I know this. This concept of the 2 structures on a corner lot instead of the one big house structure. I'm okay with the deferral, but I would really like to hear kind of the board's thoughts and concerns about that concept in general, because I do think it's scale inappropriate in this situation. A lot of those examples of the double duplexes are about 40 foot wide, and I only have 35 foot to work with. And in that case, there are shotguns, and given the topography, most of the backyard would be asphalt or driveway to try to get it into a garage if we were to get to the garages underneath the garage. So I think the context of 15th Avenue is not being considered either, because there are houses that face 15th, and I think there's vacant land across the street that's going to be developed too. So, and given the size and scale of Woodland Street, just one street behind this, I think all those kind of scale considerations should be considered.
Yeah, you understand though, as we discuss it, we're giving you our ideas. It doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily support one way or the other. As long as you understand this, it's strictly a discussion, it's not a vote, and it is our thoughts, not necessarily a recommendation.
Right, it's good to hear staff's thoughts, but it's also good to hear your thoughts on it too, because I know this is a hot topic right now, and I know I'd kind of like to know where you guys stand on the issue.
Well, you understand the guidelines are the guidelines, and that's sort of, those are our directives.
I understand, but some objectives, some are objective, subjective.
Okay.
So I do have the question about addressing the garage in the front. What are your other alternatives to that? And also with the alley access, if it is true to the overlay, then you must consider that.
Right. The rear house is right on the setback, so I would probably have to come back and ask for a setback reduction at that point and put the alley put the garage on the alley. But given the 35-foot width, it's going to be very hard to get a driveway access to the front house from the alley. You can try, but again, I might be asking for a setback reduction on 15th at that point to try to get that in. I heard the word pedestrian friendly, and I don't necessarily think 15th is very pedestrian friendly right now. And in fact, there is a driveway on 15th in the existing site right now. There was talk with my client about putting sidewalks in, but I don't know if that would help or hurt us in this situation because of the topography of the site. So those are all issues we're kind of debating internally about that.
I'll chime in for just my 2 cents worth and let it go at that. First of all, I think I really applaud the effort you're making to try to address a lot of issues, but you're trying to put a lot of stuff on a small lot. And I am definitely troubled by the garage entrance. It's such a prominent part of this. And I certainly am in line with the staff's goal to having a subordinate structure. And I think you got some more selling to do to all of us that those two things are worthwhile. I mean, we don't have an obligation to put that many two-car garages on a site. We've got what appears to be 4 cars worth of parking on a small lot. So, I hear you. I know it's going to be a challenge. You've done some creative stuff already. I applaud that, and like you to encourage to take Richard's suggestion and sit down with the neighborhood. But I am struggling with that garage entrance, and I am struggling with the massing as we just kind of look all the way up and down the street. And so it may be just convincing us that you've got it covered, but it's a challenge. And, it's hard to see slopes and hard to see all the context and just this environment that we're in. And but I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Thank you.
Okay, I wanted to put in a good word for the trees. We just moved from a home out in Belmead, and they had the most gorgeous magnolia trees. And if there's any way it doesn't look like there's much room for them, is there? And I know you'll say the bulldozers will mess them up if you can't, that you won't be able to save them. Oh, well, anyway, I just want to put in a word for the trees. I'm going to second that on the tree. Is there not a tree ordinance that says when you do have new development that there should be an X number of greens?
It doesn't fall into the 1 and 2 family structures. It falls into commercial.
Thank you.
All right. There is a suggestion that you would ask for deferral if you choose to do that.
The applicant respectfully asks for a deferral.
Okay. All right.
For how long does he have to have a time period?
It's advisable.
Yeah. You may want to stipulate a time period, like 2 more months or
1 month?
If you think you can get it done, I would probably suggest 2, but it's up to you.
2 months? Okay. 2 months.
As far as we're concerned, can we back 2 months and have all this lined up? We're fine with that.
Okay, but is 2 okay? We're
2 months.
talking about working with the neighborhood, okay? All right, we will defer then on 1419 Holly.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have to vote on that, or do we vote on the deferral?
If it's by the appellant's request, that would suffice. You're certainly welcome to if you want to formalize it, but since it's his request, technically you're okay.
Okay. All right, moving on, 1701 Sweetbriar.
I'll wait for the din as they filter out of the room. Okay, 1701 Sweetbriar Avenue is a 1.5-story brick craftsman-style house. It was constructed circa 1915. It's described in the Belmont-Hillsborough National Register District nomination as being a contributing structure in the overlay. The project before us is primarily to repair and do energy upgrades. Most of the scope of that work is not covered by this district's design guidelines. What is being reviewed is what's happening on the roof. Typically, as you know, replacing a roof material itself would not be reviewed in neighborhood conservation overlays, but full removal of a roof is considered partial demolition, which would require review and approval. The existing roof is original roof, or the original framing is framed with 2x4 rafters. The roof shows some degree of sagging, which is consistent of what you would see on many houses of that age. The current proposal would remove the original roof and decking, reframing the roof with 2x10s. That would straighten out the roof and allow for additional insulation above the ceiling of which is existing in the finished upper story. In addition to straightening the roof line, the result would be that the entire roof surface and the ridge would be raised approximately 6 to 8 inches, essentially lifting up the existing roof to a new point. The point at which the primary roof meets the front porch would also be moved forward, as that front roof isn't being raised. The portion of the existing roof in front of the front dormer would also remain as is, giving the appearance that that portion is recessed when actually the rest of the roof is being raised around it. The removal of the roof and reconstruction in a different form, in a different location, essentially does not meet sections 3B1A or 3B1B of this district's design guidelines, as it alters the historic appearance and would make it difficult to reproduce the original conditions. Staff finds that altering the roof also does not meet sections 1B3, 6, 11, or 12 of the design guidelines, which are closely based on the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties. The additional height alteration of the porch roof, the recess and fascia, and essentially being the recessed dormer, changes the historic character of the property and would require alteration of distinctive features. In addition, the alteration, as I said, would alter or destroy historic materials. Staff is recommending disapproval of the proposal to alter the roof height as not meeting the Belmont-Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District Design Guidelines. I can answer any questions, and the owner of the property is here as well if you have questions for him.
Do you have any alternatives in mind? Is there another solution?
Typically, in a case like this, somebody, if they want to, straighten out a roof, do it from the inside. Although I guess because the attic is already finished is the reason that they're trying to do it from the outside in.
To address the commission, please come forward, give your name and address.
Madam Chairman, members of the commission. Madam Chairman, members of the commission, thank you for allowing me to present our proposed project. My name is Bill Howell. My wife Margaret and I purchased the residence at 1701 Sweetbriar at the end of a 6-month short sale process. Do you want our current address, or is this sufficient? Okay. We closed the transaction on February 28th. On March 6th, I discovered that the deadline for submissions to be considered at this month's Historic Zoning Commission meeting was the next day. I called the Metro Historic Zoning Commission immediately, and Sean Alexander agreed to meet me at the house on very short notice. I appreciate his promptness, responsiveness, and advice throughout this process. I prepared our submission in less than 24 hours. And I think there are some differences between what we discussed then and what I'm proposing now, and I'll present those. The problem with the existing condition of the house that leads us to propose adding structural insulation panels on top of the existing structure is the fact that the original rafters are 2x4s on 24-inch centers. That combination is not even listed in standard span tables, but 2x4s on 12-inch centers are rated for a 7-foot 6-inch span, and the existing spans range from 9 feet to 12 feet. It is not surprising that the photographs show permanent deflections of the roof surfaces. We considered adding insulation inside the existing envelope, but that would have led to greater snow loading and possible collapse of the roof. It would also leave us with a seriously diminished second floor space. 6.5-inch structural insulated panels on top of the existing roof sheathing will provide sufficient insulation and structural rigidity to meet our dual goals of a safe and an energy-efficient structure. I've made an effort to minimize the visual impact of the additional thickness of the panels. Sean, could you show some of the next images? That's the back
this
of
is
the
a view
house
from the rear.
Onto the drawings. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but yeah, that's probably the best one, Sean, if you could go back to that. This is a partial elevation of the west side of the house with the before above and to the left and the after below and to the right. In order to, let's see. I maintained the break in the roof slope at the same place as before, kept the main roof slope the same, and adjusted the porch roof slope from about 12 degrees to about 15 degrees so that the break would still be apparent, and the depth of the porch roof fascia and the height of the front edge of the porch roof would not have to increase more than 2 inches. The main roof fascia was increased from a 2x6 to a 2x8, and the porch fascia from a 2x4 to a 2x6. And actually, the current fascias are not original material. They're standard modern dimension 2x material. Also, it was necessary to place an apron in front of the dormer so the insulation panels would not conceal the dormer windowsill. The height of the dormer between the main roof and dormer eaves will appear to be reduced by 6.5 inches. In summary, I think we have developed a reasonable resolution to the conflict between the three important values of historic integrity, structural adequacy, and energy efficiency, and we ask for your approval. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else that would like to address the commission?
Did you make any changes since the submission, or is this the same as what we've seen?
This was submitted later, and the discussion about going to 2x8 or 2x10 rafters and sistering those to the existing 2x4s was one of the options that we were considering at that time, but the drawings that we submitted actually were intended to show the structural insulated panels.
So Sean, your presentation was based on the revision, or?
Actually, I got the other drawings in your packet on the deadline. This drawing here actually came in the day that I had actually already finished and printed out the staff recommendations when Mr. Howell dropped it off, so I just went ahead and stapled it to the end. I didn't look closely enough to realize that it was that much different, although effectively the result is the same. The difference between sistering or implementing with 2x10s as opposed to putting SIP panels sleeper style on top is pretty much the same. I guess the section is different, but in elevation it's fairly similar.
Questions for the applicant?
I got a couple. I'm sorry.
You go ahead. We might double do, so you go ahead.
How do these structural insulated panels, how far are they going to span? They're 6 inches thick.
They have a span rating for the 6.5-inch panel. I believe it's about a 10-foot span rating, and they would be installed perpendicular to the rafters. And that will allow them actually to rest over interior walls. And I think they are rated for roughly a 10-foot span.
That sounds right to me, but if you're laying them perpendicular to the rafters, is that weight just going to set on top of those rafters? I mean, are those interior walls going to be able to pick that up?
We have not yet consulted with a structural engineer, but we will. I have some architectural background, but have not practiced in a while.
Well, I'm an architect and I'm still practicing, but I haven't gotten it right yet. I would, I think this is going to be tricky. It'll be really tricky. And, I'm a little concerned. I understand what you're saying about sistering versus the SIP system and all of them being about the same depth. Yeah. But I am concerned that whatever you do is going to really work. And Sean, is the main concern we've got that pocket under the dormer?
There are several things that are all of equal importance. The pocket changes the appearance, the shortening of the face of the dormer wall, and then the raising of the entire roof ridge by, the long side of a triangle with 6.5-inch sides.
Between 7 and 7.5 inches.
Just the actual change of location of the roof plane from here to here. It's altering the form and changing the pitch of the porch roof.
And what is someone supposed to do in this situation? The guy's got a structural problem, and how do you solve it?
Well, as I said earlier, I think you can structurally reinforce it from the inside. The impact and the deflection and stress of taking off the roof and doing what's being proposed, I think that it might cause, the reason for not doing it that way would be to avoid disturbing the interior space, which was finished, I think, in 1995, just based on a permit that didn't have any drawings before the overlay. So in 1995, doing this work may even cause cracks and splits in all of that drywall that we're avoiding not disrupting. That's going to essentially make all this moot in the end. It's going to have to be done eventually.
So, Juan, if I hear what you're saying is that you're not,
and you said you're going to investigate it, that we're not really sure that this is what you're trying to achieve is structurally sound.
Unless it spans it
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's a free
Well-
span, and then it's going to be 10, 12 inches thick.
Well, also, if the interiors, if the structure can't handle a slow snow load or anything, is it going to be able to handle these other new spans?
Well, I mean, you could conceptually, you could add more, you could exacerbate the problem. I assume if you're going to get with the structural engineer, you'll figure that out. My quick response to all this is that, first of all, we've got to find a way to help somebody solve a structural problem. The second thing is that some of these things that we've mentioned are sort of within the range of normal tolerances of things in the day. Increasing this overall pitch 6 inches is one of the things. That little pocket in front of the dormer is something else again. And again, I kind of look at the technical side and say, well, how are you going to keep that thing from leaking? I suspect that a little drywall work will be a lot cheaper than a lot of the other stuff if you get into it and you can find a way you can transfer these loads on down and put some beams in. I mean, we've worked on a lot of historic structures over the years, and if there's a way you can get in there and put some beams that are perpendicular to the rafters and reduce that span, it will be a whole lot cheaper than trying to do the SIPs. These SIPs aren't cheap. They're great insulating, they're great products. But if you can figure out how to do all that, I think you can do it and solve everybody's issues. But that's just me.
Did you have any additional?
I think that was right on.
Do you have anything? No. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If there's no one else, we'll close the public hearing and have discussion. This
is above my pay.
I don't know what Ron totally said. But if there's some leeway we can grant the guy, I don't mind doing it. I mean, I'm not in favor of doing everything, but I really don't know how to close this thing.
Well,
I think we're all uncertain for structurally how it's going to work.
Continue to do some research. Go ahead and talk to the structural engineer and come up with some other options. And come back.
Well, again, we're not trying to tell you what to do, but if you were to defer it and get a structural engineer involved and have him explain where the essential areas are, then we would be more sympathetic to making minor changes in those areas. Again, there's certain tolerances that, I mean, historic structures of this era were not all built the same, and there's some normal tolerances in there that personally I'm comfortable with. I don't know about the rest of the commission. But, trying to avoid that little pocket in front of that dormer would be a nice thing to avoid, in my opinion. And then some of the other details we can kind of work out. But if you'd like to defer it and come back with a structural engineer and talk a little bit more about how this is actually going to work.
Yes.
Before I, commit some money for a structural engineer, I'd like to, have some assurance that it will pass the Historic Zoning Commission, and maybe, that we may be in an impasse. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know that we can say that, yes, if you do this, it will be approved.
Right.
I think that what you're hearing today is that we're not comfortable with your proposal.
Right.
And we would like for you to take a little bit more initiative to find out what a solution would be and maybe come back to the commission and with another solution.
Okay. I don't think I see a solution that doesn't involve a thicker roof structure, and that brings back the problem of the apron. And I don't have any other ideas of how to handle that condition.
Okay, so you're asking us to vote today on your proposal.
Does that preclude me from coming back with another proposal at a later time?
No, not at all.
Okay. Then yes, I am asking you to vote today.
All right. Okay. All right.
This is my contractor.
Actually, we've already closed the public hearing, so, I mean, if we'll need to.
Can I consult with him?
You may consult with him.
Can I make a motion that we open the public hearing and hear this gentleman?
Can't make that motion.
I'd like to make that motion.
No, okay, I have a motion to reopen the public hearing. Do I have a second? Okay, all in favor? Okay.
I mean, I think it's worth hearing what he has to say.
Sorry about this. I'm Rand Batson, and I own Rand Batson Construction Company. And I just wanted to address that one specific issue about the potential leaking around the dormer. We can weld in a pocket, and we've done it many times in the past. And if it's professionally done and the flashing is done appropriately, then there's, in my opinion, there's no chance that there'll be leakage around the dormer. I know that's just a small issue, and there are much more serious issues afoot, but I did want to clarify that, in my opinion, that wouldn't be an issue. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Any more comment? We'll close the public hearing again. All right. Okay. Do I hear any more comments, or do we hear a motion?
I make a motion per staff recommendation to disapprove this proposal.
You want
to agree? Say it
I
again.
know. Same thing.
I make the motion per staff recommendation to disapprove this proposal to alter the roof height.
All right. I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is staff recommendation. Okay. 1114 Forest.
And 1114 Forest was removed at the owner's request. And so we will move, if you don't mind, to 405 Chapel.
405 Chapel.
And it is, and 405 Chapel has an existing building on the lot which is non-contributing. It's roof form, and again, it's date of construction or with outside the period of significance. Excuse me. The context immediately around this house is also non-contributing, but you don't have to go very far to see several historic homes. Right on the corner, there are several that are about the same height as what's proposed. So the project meets the guidelines in terms of height and scale, setback and rhythm of spacing, materials, orientation, but not in terms of form and roof shape. So if you don't mind, I'll just concentrate on those areas because there are many ways it does meet the guidelines. But the home does not match the context in terms of form with the two dominant projecting bays, two projecting wall dormers and an asymmetrical gable, a porch roof that projects beyond the width of the house, and a pushed back upper level. Although wall dormers are seen in the district, they are fairly rare. They are something that we've approved in the past, but again, upon reflection, upon seeing them completed, find that they really don't meet the context of the neighborhood very well, and so recommend that they not be used. Also, so the project also meets the guidelines in terms of the rhythm of openings, with the exception of the right side first story. So we do recommend an additional window. Might need to be a small one at the staircase, or maybe it was a bathroom. Yes, or a shuttered faux window into the closet, or a small window above the stairwell. So in summary, here it is, the perspective. In summary, staff recommends approval of infill construction at 405 Chapel with the conditions that the upper level be redesigned to match the context in terms of the form. The driveway be a strip driveway, at least to the front wall of the house. This is a new driveway that's proposed. And final design for materials be approved by staff, and that a window be added to the ground floor on the right side. With these conditions, staff finds that the project meets the design guidelines for the Eastwood Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay.
Have you all talked to the architect about the dormers?
We have.
Okay.
And they prefer to bring this plan to you today.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. This item is open for public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to address the commission? Please come forward and give your name and address, please.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Brett Diaz. I live at 214 Chapel Avenue, just down the street from the project. Mitch Hodge, the architect, couldn't be here today. He's on vacation in Eastern Europe, I believe. And he asked me to bring forward an alternate front elevation. So if I may pass that around.
Are you open to receiving something new?
I think we'd like to see it. If that's one of our concerns, then we would. We want staff to look at that too, please.
Oh, yeah, that's close. I did away with hair up.
Essentially, that rendering just shows what the front facade would look like without the wall dormers. And I think it's aesthetically speaking, I think it does look better just having that plane broken up a bit with the wall dormers. We're totally open to the other conditions with the driveway and the additional window and the materials, but we would ask that we would consider that front elevation as it stands, as was submitted. But again, if you guys don't feel that's appropriate, we will work with staff to develop something that is appropriate. But that is just an example of what it may look like without the wall dormers.
I don't know that we could actually vote on this since the staff hasn't evaluated it, but the fact that you are open to work with the staff, I think, is
it was
important.
just right. It was just an example of what it may look like if you flatten that one plane.
Okay. Well, like I said, no, I mean we're not voting on that proposal
Sure.
at all.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I will jump in just a little bit. I think that architectural terms, you can look at different dictionaries and get different definitions. So I wanted to be sure we were all talking about the same thing. To my definition, this is still a wall dormer since it is a window that continues from the wall up through the roof. So but again, I mean, I know you could get a different definition in another book, but.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission?
I got a question before you step
Okay.
away. They were suggesting a small window around the stair. Is that okay with you guys?
It should be. I have to go back and study the floor plan to see if that's possible. But if it is possible, it's no problem at all. And a faux window would be fine with us as well. Something to break up that plane.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I can comment. I mean,
sure.
A question quick. But the staff is comfortable with everything except those two windows and that other. Is that right?
These four things.
Yeah. Well, I guess I could read that. But but everything we're in good shape. If we were to approve this, subject to staff review and coming to a consensus on these front-facing second floor windows, I see your point. I've actually designed a house that had this one time millions years ago when I did houses, and it comes off a lot stronger in real life than it looks like in drawings, particularly two-dimensional drawings. So I would like to see them a little bit less of a statement myself, but I'm comfortable with the staff working that out with them.
Is that a motion?
It can be.
Go for it.
I move approval with subject to the four issues the staff listed, and them reaching an agreement with the applicant.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to adopt staff recommendation. And that includes the upper level redesign and approval if staff will find it appropriate. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Staff recommendations approved. Okay. 1805 Forest.
1805 Forest Avenue is currently a vacant lot. The commission approved the demolition of a non-contributing structure on the site in January of this year. The application is for construction of a 2.5-story infill. So here's the site plan. The proposed structure meets all the required base zoning setbacks and is contextual in terms of its width, its depth, its lot coverage, and its location on the lot. The application does involve a new driveway using an existing curb cut. You can see that on the site plan. Since no driveway is currently existing, staff asked that the driveway be concrete strips until at least the start of the wall of the house, which I've kind of indicated there on the solid red lines, kind of where the strip should go to at least, and then its solid driveway would be appropriate behind that. Here's an image of the front facade. I hope it's a little bit clearer on your screens than it is on the large screen. The new structure will be 2.5 stories tall with a maximum height of 33 feet at the front. The perceived height of the structure will be minimized by the projecting gabled bay, which is 29 feet tall, and by the side gable primary roof form, which ensures that the maximum height of 33 feet does not occur until 15 feet beyond the front wall of the house. The design of the front facade includes a wall dormer, which is not common on historic houses in Laughlin Springs. While very few historic examples of wall dormers may exist, there are not enough examples for them to be considered a typical feature. And although the Commission has in the past approved a handful of wall dormers, it has more often disapproved them because after construction, the Commission has found that they do not meet the guidelines. The Commission typically requires dormers be roof dormers set back from the front wall of the house by a minimum of 2 feet. Staff further finds that in this instance, the wall dormer accentuates the height of the structure and makes it appear out of scale with its historic context. Staff therefore asks that a condition of approval be that the wall dormer is redesigned to meet the guidelines for dormers. The primary cladding material for the structure will be cement fiberboard, and staff asks that the reveal be a maximum of 5 inches. Other materials include cement panels, trim boards, wood trim, wood windows, and pedestrian doors, a steel garage door, concrete block foundation, asphalt shingle roof, metal roof, and stained wood deck. All these materials have been approved by the Commission in the past, and staff is fine with them for this project. Here are the 2 side facades. As you can see, or hopefully you can see on your screen, the site slopes fairly significantly. I think there's a difference of about 8 feet from the front wall of the house to the back wall of the house. Staff finds the proportion and rhythm of openings on the house to meet the guidelines, so there's no changes that we're suggesting on that end. And here's the rear facade. The project does involve a rear attached garage. Staff finds the attached garage to meet the guidelines because it is located at the rear of the house where accessory structures are typically located. Because the garage is located at the basement level of the house and because the steep slope of the site makes a detached garage impractical. And here are some context photos. The photograph on the left is what's on the left side of the site. So there's a non-contributing house next door, and then a contributing house on the other side of that non-contributing house. To the right is a contributing house, a historic house, and that house is about 20 feet tall. And then on the other side of that is a duplex infill that the Commission approved in about 2006, and that is about 30 feet tall. 3 houses down from the site is a fairly tall contributing historic structure, and that structure is about 34 feet, 10 inches tall. And then directly across the street are predominantly 1 to 1.5 story structures in the range of 20 to 26 feet. As you can see in the photographs, across the street, the whole kind of area slopes downward. So across the street, the houses are kind of pushed up on a hill more so than what the site is that's in question. So in conclusion, staff finds that the proposed infill meets the design guidelines so long as several conditions are met, including the wall dormer be eliminated or redesigned to be a typical roof dormer, the siding have a reveal of 5 inches, staff review and approve all windows and doors, roof color, and porch floor material, any utilities be located behind the house or on the side facade beyond the midpoint of the house, the driveway be concrete strips until at least the front corner of the left side of the house, and finally, staff review and approve any new landscape features. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I believe the applicant is here to address the commission and answer questions as well.
At this point, if not, we'll open the public hearing, and if someone would like to speak on this item, come and give your name and address, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Baird. I'm the architect. I'd like to thank staff for helping us review the project before we submit it. I think we made a lot of good revisions before we submit it. We agree with the staff recommendations, except for the wall dormer. This is wall dormer day, it seems, but we have the smallest wall dormer of the day. It's one of the things I'd like to point out is it projects about 1 foot from the front wall. The overall width of the dormer is narrower than the windows below. The windows on the second floor that are in the wall dormer, they have the same head height as the other windows, egress windows for bedrooms along the front. And most of the stuff that you've seen today are pretty large wall dormers, a couple of feet projection, and typically have had 2 windows stacked one above the other. We just have one. I believe the difference in height between the eave of the wall dormer and the main roof dormer is, I think it's about 1 foot or 1.5 feet, something like that. So it's really slight. Our concern was that on the remaining flat front wall to the left of the right-hand gable, we just felt that we needed some relief in that wall to help make it more interesting. In terms of accentuating the overall height, it does a little bit, but it's pushed back 7 feet from the edge of the porch, and it's also pushed back probably about 15 feet from the face of the right-hand gable piece. So we'd really like to keep it like it's designed. I know that we've talked about if it was the roof just went straight across, then what we would have to do is the egress window in the bedroom there, the middle one, we would need to make it a casement window and sort of make it look like a double hung window somehow. But that window would have to be, I think, a 7-foot head height instead of 8-foot head height. We'd really like to keep the design as it is. Thank you.
David, is the treatment of the roof of your dormer the same as the roof behind it, or is it different material?
It's a different material, so that is one accentuation, I guess. The main roof is asphalt shingles, and the shed roofs in the front and on the side, right now as it stands, are standing seam metal roofs.
Is that just an architectural feature that you want?
Yes. And in terms of the color of the roofs, it's both are dark colored roofs. It was just sort of a different texture on the roof, one being metal and one being asphalt shingles. But I can see how, now that you pointed out, it may accentuate one over the other.
Maybe you thought about just making that asphalt, just out of curiosity, or I don't want to get into a big design discussion.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, we haven't, and I can see how that would be more consistent with sort of blending in.
What space is that? Is there a space in the house?
It's a corner bedroom.
Okay.
And the left-hand side windows are smaller windows up high because it's a corner, and we needed a space at least one wall to put a bed on. The other wall has closet and an entry door. So there's really, unless you made the other windows egress windows, you'd have to put the beds up against these tall windows.
Okay.
So this is really the egress window, the window in the middle of the dormer.
Have you seen or given us an example of historic application of this kind of dormer?
Not yet. The answer is no. There, as Melissa said, there have been some dormers, wall dormers approved in more modern buildings, but in terms of wall dormers, it becomes historic context, I guess, would be like bay windows or something like that, or which could have a flat roof on them, not necessarily a faceted sort of roof. One of our main concerns again was trying to get a window that seemed like a generous size window for fire egress, and the one that we're showing is the minimum size fire egress window at the moment. Otherwise, we would just change it to a casement and get egress that way.
What's your floor-to-floor height? How tall is this?
On that floor, it's 9 feet. The floor to ceiling height on that floor is 9 feet.
How about the first floor?
10 feet.
I'm going to take a stab at trying to be a nice guy today. I'll move approval with staff recommendations. Make sure I have the right one here. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I move approval of the wall dormer subject to a change of roof material to blend in with the main roof material of the house.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Failure to get a second. You're trying to be a nice guy today.
I can give it a second.
Okay.
And I shall do so.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion of the acceptance of 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of staff recommendation and a revision of number 1 to accept the wall dormer with the change of roof material for the dormer. That is the motion and a second. All in favor of that motion? All in favor? 3. All opposed?
Sort of be the wrong guy here. I'm sympathetic. You can give me
all right.
So you're opposed?
Well, that's close. It's close. We've approved them. I've been on them, and they come off a lot stronger than they look in a 2D drawing.
I might have one little thing that I don't know how we could slip this in, but the little vertical.
Actually, Madam Chair, forgive me for interrupting. I apologize for the poor manners. While you've got a motion, while you're kind of mid-vote, we need to be clear on what your vote is. I thought I understood it to be 3-1. That may have been mistaken on my part.
That is correct.
If in fact that is the case, then the motion would of course fail, and you just want to make sure that's clear on the record before you proceed into further discussion of the matter.
Oh, because we don't have enough here?
That's correct. It would require 4 affirmative votes in order to pass, in light of the fact you've got 5 sitting commissioners.
Okay. Ron, take a look at the diagram. I mean, on here, and if you blend the roof, if you blend the roof in with the same material and do away with the little vertical. I don't know. I'm architectural. I'm no good. The little vertical pieces underneath the roof of the dormer.
Yeah, I can support. I can support. I would just like to. I'd like to see them work a little bit to play down the scale of this.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. I mean, I don't think it's a strong deal. I think you've got. Again, just you've got a good form going. I think the overall is working in your direction. I think you just kind of polish on this a little bit and get with staff and.
You won't look at the diagram.
She's talking about this.
The front.
Yeah, I mean, that would help. I mean, every aspect of it, just to play it down, changing
Yeah.
the roof material, and kind of play it down and quit making it such a strong statement in the overall. You've got the projections on the side. That's really needs to be the strongest part of it. And I think these are tricky. And we have improved them, we've disapproved them, I've seen them, they worked in some cases, haven't in others, and it's usually how refined it is and how it's set in. And I can support it if they'll just agree to work with the staff to kind of come to something that's a reasonable compromise. That's kind of where I am.
Robin, does that give you all enough direction?
I'm not 100% sure. I will say, just to clarify where we were headed with this, so the applicant has worked with us and brought it down significantly already, quite a bit, and we appreciate that. And we were looking at this not in terms of necessarily this project alone, but the bigger picture. If we continue to approve the wall dormers, we'll continue to get these projects where we feel like they're accentuating the height when it shouldn't be, and all those other issues. So the concern really here was a bigger picture than just this one project.
Okay. That being said, do I hear a motion?
Well, may I ask a question of staff before? I want to make sure I know what makes this particular dormer a wall dormer.
That's a good question. It's when that window comes up above the roof. It continues along the wall and then breaks into the roof line.
Oh, well, see, that's just what I was talking about doing away with, just lowering that little.
Well, it's straight up from this wall here. It comes up.
Oh.
Let's try to show you.
Well,
see that little part right there?
Do away with that is what I was.
Well, that doesn't make it not a wall dormer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not sure we can get to the point where we can say no wall dormers. I hear you on that, but I think that in some cases, and maybe even in this case, a smaller one that's played down a little bit would be okay. But that's just my opinion.
Work some more with the staff, so.
Well, I think they have, what I'm understanding what Robin had said, that they have worked considerably to come to this conclusion, that this is playing down that wall dormer. I don't know how much more they would be willing to compromise or redesign.
But from the staff's perspective, you guys want no wall dormers, or you can continue to.
That's where we were headed.
And I'm not sure I can go there, particularly on new structures.
Well, the application says, like you just pointed out, a redesign of that dormer. So why don't we just vote on that and
more typical of the historic.
Yeah. I mean, that says what we're trying to get to.
All right, is that a motion?
So we're not doing.
Yeah, I'll do that. Listen, I never make motions.
But the intent of the condition that the staff has put on it is that it would not be a wall dormer.
No.
That it would be a redesign.
No, the way I would prefer to make the motion is to approve the application and adopt the recommendations of the staff, all 6 of them. And number 1 is just as it's written. Applicant redesign the front wall dormer so that it is more typical of historic dormers.
Which means that it would not be a wall dormer.
No, well, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. And I'm saying I'm making a motion for approval as written. Their application that we approve as written.
But I think historically there were no wall dormers, which I think is what you're getting at. But certainly, if the commission feels comfortable with wall dormers, we could work with them to make this less noticeable.
Okay.
But what it says is, that's what this says, so.
Okay, all right, so we have a motion that is staff recommendation. Correct?
Yes.
All right, all in favor, do I hear a second?
I second.
All right, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes to adopt staff recommendation.
That's why I like it.
All right.
Go on record as saying, I think that's the first time a motion I've made has ever passed.
We'll so know, Julie. Okay, 1902 Beechwood.
That one, I believe 1902 is off the agenda for this month.
Okay.
So thank you. We do have one more item, if you don't mind if I just continue on, and that's a revision of your rules and procedures. And this is just an addition. This isn't changing any of the existing language, but it's adding language for the process of how you would handle if someone wanted to bring back the same case to you a second time. Now, obviously, applicants can bring new cases, revise their drawings, and come back to you as often as they'd like. But this sets up a policy for how you would approach if they wanted to bring the same project back to you again without any changes. And what that does is require that they have some new evidence that there's no way they could have had the first time around. So again, this doesn't change any existing language, just adds some new language, and it's the same, it's almost exactly the same as what the Planning Commission has added to their rules and procedures as well.
And Robin, that is specific to, on this page 6, 3 and 4, post-hearing request?
Post-hearing request, all the underlined is new language.
Okay.
And the rest is just the I didn't copy the entire section for you, the entire document for you since you already have it. Just showed you where it would be inserted within the existing.
And this is just giving them direction on how to.
This is setting up your policy for your procedure and how you would handle it.
It says within 60 days. If it's longer than 60 days, can I just go ahead and reapply?
They could if they change the project.
They got to change it.
Okay. All right, we need to vote on that? All right.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of the revision?
Aye.
All opposed? Revision to the rules and procedures pass. Okay. Any other business? Do I hear? Second. Second. Meeting adjourned.
Well, I think I need to